Hello, Culture Matters podcast. We're back with a culture topic. If you follow me on Instagram, Jay Doran underscore the culture man, you've seen, and you will see content or conversation. I hate content, relegate me to commodity here. Conversation on different topics around business, life, theory, culture, etc., etc. They're short videos. If you like them and you're getting value from them, here's an expanded thought. Right, this is taking one of them today. How do you keep employees for the long term? We're going to expand on this more than we have been on those short videos. Now, why is this valuable? Because if we shock our assumptions, if we challenge our assumptions, there's an opportunity to learn through unlearning, relearning, reinterpreting, reimagining, innovating. We value innovation in companies. We at least we think we value it, or we can conceptualize the value of innovation, or reimagining a company so that it continues to be valuable for its customers and so on and so forth. But what about innovating ourselves? That's what education is. That's what learning is. Or learning is the process of education. Education is the process of innovating the individual self as it relates to the culture, to the world. So why are we talking about this? Why is this worth listening to? Because who knows who you could be? Who knows what you could accomplish, and who you are as a relationship with what you could accomplish. So how do we keep employees for the long term? I don't think we do, meaning I don't think you want to, meaning, or not necessarily. Who actually does want to do that? Many that say they do, I don't think they do. What I think they're looking for is what's what can I gain? What can I gain? Now, this is the thing. What if that's not you? You're like, what? That's not. No, I want to have employees for the long term. My point in bringing it up is, even if you do, if you the business is going to give to you something that is going to fulfill certain urges and needs. This was outlined in Adam Smith, the first economist. He talks about the like the whole basis of economics was based on the selfishness of the individual, that despite our selfishness or our self orientation, we create more value for others. Okay. So the reason I bring that up is because how do you keep employees for the long term? I don't, I think the selfishness is innate. It doesn't mean we don't have a capacity for altruism. We've got to recognize the selfishness first, because if we deceive ourselves to thinking that there isn't a degree of selfishness, it can lead us to think we're better than we are. Because the reason I bring this up is I often see, or there's this undertone of, the reason we want employees for the long term is because we want them to do what we don't want to do. We want people to do what we don't want to do. And this is the thing. There's a difference between and delegating and obfuscating responsibility. And the difference between delegating and obfuscating responsibility is, if I've delegated my former responsibility around my job description to someone else, and I've done part of my job of, as let's say, the founder, you know, attracting talent. We talked in another episode of top talent, attracting talent, and being, creating that tornado of energy and excitement. Maybe I was at one time forced to do that job because, well, who else was going to do it? I had to do it. So there's a difference between delegating because I'm growing the culture, expanding the brand, expanding the market possibilities, expanding how many customers can be solved, which creates upward mobility, job creation, so on and so forth, and obfuscating responsibility. Because as I delegate out, if I don't have the next job description for myself, if I don't have the next battle to fight, if I don't have the next challenge, as Peterson would say, Nietzsche, optimized challenge. I'm obfuscating responsibility because my part of my responsibility is modeling my ability to respond for my people. So it comes like they're I have to be extremely careful not to be stuck in the lull or the entitlement of having done part of my job was to attract talent and delegate responsibility. I can easily become disengaged as a consequence of the success of the growth of my business. And this is something that happens. And part of having a great part of having, partnerships is partners that are on an equal playing field of power, influence, and authority. They're going to talk to each other implicit in the relationship, structurally different than, or let's just say more straightforward, more direct, more honest than those lower in the hierarchy, in the absence of those higher in the hierarchy creating a safe and inclusive, like no matter what you do, you create safety and inclusion. People lower in the hierarchy are going to be less likely to be honest with you. You can increase that degree of honesty with your benevolence, your humility, your sympathy, your empathy, your even sympathy, your empathy, your uh, awareness, and that all has a relationship with engagement in the business. It's much easier to empathize, for example, with a customer. Sorry, I'm not a customer, an employee. If we're empathizing with customers, and we can't, and challenging customers, and we're having customer relationships. If we're not having customer relationships, we're even if we don't know what to do, and we're not, we haven't conceptualized that we're not actually doing our job. We'll Our conscience knows we're not doing what we need to do. Like, we can repress all we want, we could deceive all we want. We're going to respond more negatively to negative emotion, which is, we live in a seat of negative emotion, because, or it spurs negative emotion, the top seat, because the top seat is ultimately held to account with all the problems of the organization. It has to help everyone through problems by getting people to uh, communicate, like to trust one another and to work as a team and respect one another and to uh, collaborate and unify through that collaboration to get things done. So how do you keep employees for the long term? First, I think we have to address the elephant in the room, that it's in our best interest to do so. And if we may not actually care about keeping them for the long term because we care about people, we might only want them for the long term because we care about ourselves a bit too much. And that, you could beat yourself up, or um that can almost sound so terribly how I'm trying to weed this thought out. And you might not identify this at all. You fall into the camp of, you've never thought about it twice. I just always, I want to grow with my people and to build something special with my people. And but then there's a whole host of other problems with that, because unconditional love is, there's an entitlement in unconditional love. And that entitlement can lead to indirect communication, meaning, let's say someone's loyal to you for many years and they've worked with you for many years and they're not living up to the expectations that the business is requiring based on the results. It may be really hard to have that conversation with them, and now you're not having that conversation with them. And the best of part of some of the best of your qualities, which is to genuinely care about your people and love them and be with them and want and be close to them, is now undermining your ability to respect them by telling them the truth, respect your position, or the shareholders keeping you in the position. Like, you're not being responsible in your job because of the care and the proximity, and what is a good quality now becomes a detrimental, or what's a good quality becomes a bad quality. So that on the other side of that pendulum, now you've got to work on being more assertive with the person that you're loyal to. You maybe even have to let go the person that you're loyal to, that's been with you the whole time, working for many years because they're not good enough anymore. And that's out of your control. And that's tough because you seek control because a founder seeks control psychologically. It's one of the impulses to start a business is not freedom, but control. It's an ideology of freedom, but it's actually an impulse, psychological uh, uh, and physiological impulse for control. So the way that one controls that circumstance is to control their narrative, and now they start deceiving themselves that that person is good enough or can be good enough, but their behaviors aren't showing them that they're good enough. And then this is where it comes into as companies grow, they need internal like learning and development and develop part of the responsibility of the organization is provide resources to people to get trained and to get better and to people ultimately like you can't control someone's desire to learn and grow and get better. You also can't control their innate capacities and abilities. So what's the likelihood that, someone in the people that start with you at zero end up being with you at, 100 billion? Well, it might be low, but it's not impossible. And, how much of that comes down to their autonomy and your autonomy? I don't know the answer to those questions, but maybe you've lived this. So like how to keep employees for the long term is not an easy answer because you may, if you don't want them for the long term, you, we may want to argue, I may want to argue with you that you do want them for the long term because as people grow and develop and build loyalty, the smarter they get, there's actually a diminishing return for their intellectual property and labor for them as the organization grows because they don't have the equity you have. And if they, but they'll have a loyalty inverse, the inverse of loyalty and equity. They're loyal as their loyalty grows, the equity grows, but their economic return on their loyalty goes down. Their return on their loyalty goes down over time, and your return on your equity goes up over time based on their time and space being a part of the organization because of the speed of trust, because like you literally don't it's like a marriage, you don't have to talk as much and you could still get things done, and there's such an exponential curve on their labor from a profit standpoint if they're good that you become extremely extremely wealthy. That's why as the owner is that ownership, why do you think that naturally people get options and bonuses and the organizations figured all these subjective ways to incentivize people to stay? And so many, most millionaires in this country are employees that become executives and get options and these things. They're not the wealthiest people in the world, but they're up there. Like meaning they're not on the Forbes 10, but they could be, or the Forbes 400 maybe even. Well, some of them are, frankly. Yeah, some of them are on the Forbes list. But like by and large, they may not be the wealthiest, but they are freaking wealthy because it's inevitable due to proximity bias, that resentment, entitlement, responsibility matrix, that the people that start with an organization that continue to grow and show their value with whoever founded it, there's these trade-offs where they'll never get the return that they could have got on their autonomy of being as it relates to if they controlled the organization and got the equity, the largest equity stake. But as time goes on and they continue to be loyal, the return on their time and space, the return on their labor has the opportunity for an exponential return that benefits you as the founder of the organization. You want long-term employees. But on the other side of it, I don't want long-term employees that obviously the math doesn't math, where they're more entitled, they cost more, but they give less of a return. This is where the conversation is important for a founder is, or like any person, not any person, but well, maybe in some level, yes, any person, but let's say founder, CEO, management, the the reason, yeah, the reasons why people become disengaged can give us awareness around our own engagement or disengagement if we're at a higher degree of control of the organization. Control as in control of other people, because control is of other people, responsibility is of ourselves. That often gets confused. We can be responsible, able to respond on a spectrum based on awareness and our innate capacities, intelligent in things, but we can't control ourselves. We control we control objects, we can control people, but we're responsible for ourselves. We can have we have this ideology of control when it's really some combination of influence and um, of influence and force, right? Influence and force. Like I have the ability, the right, or like the justification, the power to tell someone what to do and they'll do it. Influence, I don't have any of that, but they'll do it. And our actions, our behaviors, the goodwill bank account we built with people have a relationship of the influence we develop with people and the power of our force. The power of, so for the example be, you tell someone what to do and you have the power, right? The justification for them, they have to do it, but they don't want to do it, but they do it anyway. Or you have the power to tell them what to do and they do it and they want to do it. And you have the justification to do it. The power and the influence are aligned, whereas the power and the influence are not aligned. I'm not influencing them, but they'll do it because I have the power, or I have the power and the influence and they do it and they want to do it. There's a great difference in lead in that dynamic of that relationship in that scenario there. So how do you actually keep employees for the long term? You're a slave to your business. And that is a little blunt, but and there's not maybe a negative connotation, there doesn't have to be a negative connotation to that. It's like if I'm not a slave to my business, then I will have slaves. Maybe another way to look at it is, the master of the domain sacrifices and is subservient to values. So to do that, you have to sacrifice, you have to have vision, you have to it benefits you in the long term to and this is where paradox comes in. It's like you have all the opportunity to sin, but if you don't, you get fruit, and then the fruit grows and grows and grows and grows. There's still a possibility that you'll be totally cut down to nothing, but you knew you did the right thing and your conscience is clear versus, you the devil's playground is yours and there don't seem to be any consequences, and then there aren't any, and then eventually your whole team kills you because you became a tyrant and you didn't realize it, and they actually hated you the whole time. They feared you, they were loyal, but they didn't respect you because you weren't respectable. And once they got a chance, they came together and they killed you like Julius Caesar was killed by his best friend Brutus and 20 something other people, because you went against the Roman culture and you became a king, acted like a king, and that wasn't what the culture wanted. They didn't want a tyrant, but you were the best, but you weren't the most wise, and so they killed you. So how to keep employees for the long term comes down to the values, and the values you get to dictate if you're in absolute control and power until you don't anymore and everything is taken from you. So that becomes more of like, what do you actually want? You want to build a company and sell it very quickly? Sin is a really good way to do that, I think, but it'll probably catch up to you. You want to build a company and, not lose everything. It's probably the virtue piece. It's just become like a massive digression, these are the thoughts that I have on. I wrote down, do you want to? Yeah, that was how this started. How do you keep employees for the long term? Do you actually want to? Do you want to stay? Do you want to stay? Can't read my own handwriting. Married for the long term. Maybe you don't. Maybe you don't. Maybe you don't want employees for long term. Well, it isn't a marriage, it's a relationship. engagement, enthusiasm. Oh, Brad. Hey, buddy. What up? You are on the monologue of the Culture Matters culture topic for today. How do you keep employees for the long term? And I have just digressed. And so here's what my notes are. Do you want to? Do you want to is the first question. How do you keep employees for long term? I don't think everybody wants to. What do you think?
I don't give a motherfucking shit.
And we will see you all the next time of the Culture Matters podcast.